World Bank has published India's development report. We are joined by senior economist Dhruv Sharma at the World Bank. Of course, he's also the author of this report. So thank you for sharing your highlights. And of course, there's a lot there that has been mentioned about India's economy. But to begin with, what led to the moderation of India's growth forecast?
We have revised our forecast from 6.6% to 6.3% in this current edition. And there are two main reasons for this. One is that the challenging external environment remains. There are still pressures when it comes to inflation. There's some financial sector turmoil going on globally, US and Europe. There was a significant deceleration in economic growth last year as well. On the domestic front, one of the main reasons for the slight moderation in our growth projections is the moderation in growth that we see in private consumption.
Right. So coming to weak consumption levels and the weak consumption growth, your thoughts really on the solution and when can India overcome this? Also the curve really that India is looking at.
Sure. If I start from the big picture first, our we're optimistic on India. 6.3% for GDP growth this year is something that is commendable. India will remain one of the fastest growing economies in the world. When it comes to the question about moderation in consumption growth, there are a couple of stories here. One is that higher income households have propped up from consumption growth. There are some weaknesses when you think about rural and lower income households. That is something that we're monitoring closely, and the government has a number of support programs that will help support vulnerable households in a time of need.
All right. Now, of course, you've mentioned inflation and how globally that remains a battle. So when do you think India can really see core inflation easing at least?
So our projections for headline inflation this year are about 5%, 5.2 exactly. That means that India's headline inflation will be within the RBI's comfort range of 2 to 6%. It was higher than that last year. A large part of that story is due to easing pressure from food and fuel. We're expecting that to continue this year and next year as well. And one of the the challenge that policymakers have all around the world is the trade-off between inflation and growth. And as far as we can tell, our assessment is that it's being managed carefully and prudently so far in India.
All right, that's good to know. But lastly, your thoughts really on the challenges ahead of India, of course, in the short term and in the long term. So, how do you think what are the key challenges and how do you think India can overcome these?
Sure. When it comes to challenges, look, in the near term, what's important to watch out is how global developments pan out. If there are economic growth shocks or there's a deceleration in economic activity in advanced economies, we do expect to have a spillover effect on India, much less so than it did 10 years ago. That impact is expected to be a little bit less than the impact would be on other emerging market economies. And domestically, there are some challenges when it comes to plugging critical gaps in infrastructure, in productivity, and in the labor market as well. And India is doing, quite a lot in that space. The government's commitment to infrastructure investment, openness to trade, a new trade, discussions about trade policy have taken the forefront of many policy discussions. And when it comes to thinking about labor markets, the government is closely thinking about what it can do to improve female labor force participation rate, for example.